I'm Andrew Hall, and this is Dead Hand Radio. Tonight we're talking about stories from the apocalypse with author E.T. Gunnarsson. E.T. is homeschooled and an avid gamer. He spent years honing his writing skills through online interactions with the global community. He's an accomplished martial artist, a student of Norse mythology and history, and he's an artist. A published author at the age of 18, his first book is called Forgive Us, a story of a post apocalyptic world devastated by pollution and climate change, and it's out now. His second book, Abandon Us, the prequel to Forgive Us, should be out later this year. E.T. also has one a very unique distinction that no one else will ever be able to duplicate. He's the first guest on this channel who was born in this century.
Wow,
So
that's
we'll,
funny.
we'll get into all these topics and more, but we're going to start and end our conversation with stories of the apocalypse. Welcome to Dead Hand Radio, ET.
Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, thanks for being here, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
And
This is a really cool experience.
nice, nice. Uh, yeah, just relaxed environment, man. Nothing formal. We're just going to have a conversation.
Okay.
Um, before we get into talking about your book, because I do want to spend a good amount of time talking about your book and your writing process and that kind of stuff. I just want to say congrats on completing your first novel, especially at such an early point in your life. How gratifying is it to be able to say that you've completed this project?
Well, it does occasionally always pop into a conversation I'm having with people. I always like, oh yeah, I wrote a book. It somehow always pops into conversation. I don't do it on purpose. I just like, oh, this is an interesting thing to tell somebody. But it's kind of interesting because like I don't really think about it. Like, it's like I don't really think like, oh, I wrote a book. And when I actually do think about it, like, oh, I wrote a book, like that's really cool. But like when I get up in the morning, like I don't really think about like I'm an author. No, I think about like what I'm gonna do in the morning, or I'm gonna go to the gym or go write more or something like that. It's not like a conscious thing, but when you realize it's there, it's like it's really cool. Uh,
Yeah, I can't imagine because I've tried to write stories and I've never really. I did try to write a book, a novel, a long time ago. I probably got a few chapters into it and then I just gave up. But what was that feeling when you completed it, man? When you finished it? Yeah,
just I did it. Like I got there. When I started Forgive Us, like I just wrote a chapter. I just threw a chapter onto the page. I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna write. I'm just gonna write. Like I tried to write like 3 or 4 other books, which will eventually come back in different forms. But when I like sat down to write Forgive Us, I was like, this is the book. This is the book that I'm gonna go to my dad. I'm gonna tell him, this is the book I'm publishing. This is this is the one, right? And one day I just wrote one chapter. And then I wrote a second chapter, and then a third chapter, and I was like, let's do a fourth chapter. And it just kind of happened very slowly that I like started getting into it. I'm like starting to get like my shoes to walk in the book. It took me like 6 months to like get like 1/3 of the way through the book until I decided that I needed a plan to finish the book. And that took me like another 6 months to finish the rest of the 2/3.
very cool. We'll talk about that a lot more in a few minutes, but um, just so people can get to know a little bit more about you and what kind of drives you. Talk about your experience as a gamer, being homeschooled, living with dysgraphia, and um, how all of this played into you becoming a writer.
Well, I was taken out of school when I was like 6 or 7. Um, I I was public schooled, and the school kind of sucked. Like when I was taken out, I was illiterate. I didn't know how to do math. Like I didn't know how to count to 10. Like there's a lot of things I didn't know how to do. And the school was kind of sucky to me. It didn't really treat me nice. So I was taken out, and while I was being like educated, um, like beginning to do homeschooling, I was tutored by, I think her name was Miss Porter, who was my kindergarten teacher. And at that age, like 6 or 7, my dad set me down in front of a computer and gave me World of Warcraft, which is one of the best games ever. And you can't convince me otherwise. Um, so while I was like learning how to read under Miss Porter, I would play World of Warcraft. So like early on, like I would just run around all day in World of Warcraft, and like I would die because I didn't know how to like fight anything, and then I would walk around as a ghost all day. So I didn't really understand the game at first. But when I started gaining a grasp of the English language, I started reading quests, and then I went and killed some monsters, and then I did another quest, and then I slowly progressed through the game, right? And while I was learning how to read, reading like the quests and stuff introduced me to more complex words, which introduced me to like the stories and stuff. And eventually, like I really like my understanding of reading and writing really grew. And at the same time, I was doing math. And this is how math is how I discovered dysgraphia and how much I hate math. I really do not like math. This doesn't work for me. But I would do math like fractions and 2 plus 2 or whatever. And when I wrote it on a pencil, it would come out horribly. Like I never learned how to write correctly on a pencil, and eventually like I would have pain when writing with a pencil. So I'd write something and then erase it and then write it again, and it would take me 20 minutes to do like 2 plus 3, right? Because I just write, erase, write, erase, write, erase. So my dad had me do math on the keyboard, and then all of a sudden I could do like 20 math questions in the span of like 2 minutes. Because it wasn't like the learning, it was just it was the doing. Like I couldn't like put pen to paper. So that just pencils caused me a lot of pain. I just cannot write in the Latin alphabet. So um yeah, like the two things kind of just all led to like a keyboard. And that's World of Warcraft led me to Starcraft, which funnily enough led me to writing. Um, I started role playing StarCraft, and I was on this there were mini games in StarCraft. You could like do like Haunted Forest, which was like Slenderman, or you could do like a tower defense game. There was all sorts of mini games, but there was one called Cortex Roleplay, which was just it would just throw you and a bunch of people onto a game map, and you could do anything. You can spawn units, you can make them talk, you can do all sorts of crazy stuff, and people would have in the roleplay sessions like that, like kind of like D&D, right? They would have characters walk around, and they would have stories, and characters would go like on adventures across the map, and fight evil wizards and that sort of stuff. Since it was StarCraft, like it was sci-fi, so it was like space marines and the Zerg with the mutants or whatever. But there were versions where it was medieval, and that's what I spent most of my time doing. I spent most of my time doing medieval role playing. So I did StarCraft for a few years. I only stopped playing like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And during that time, I transitioned to Steam, which I didn't really role play on Steam a lot of time. There's a lot of weird people at Steam. It was weird. But that led me to Discord, which is I role played on Discord for like 3 or 4 years. And Discord is what kind of gave me my ability to write. I met a lot of like really good people um, on Discord. And being good at role playing usually means you're competent enough to write complex paragraphs while at the same time leading characters along. So that's like I transitioned from Steam to Discord, and I met my good friend Longkeem, who's from Malaysia, on Discord, and we've had many role plays of like giant proportions. Like we've had like role plays about divine wars in the cosmos and all sorts of crazy stuff. Like I've made him cry one time by making his character kill his lover. It was the best experience ever. He cried. It was so funny. Um, But like role playing with like Login was like my primary like role play partner. He he kind of like people like him gave me the confidence to like write really well. Like we would write like how roleplay functions is like text by text. So you would write out a few paragraphs, then the other person would write out a few paragraphs. So it would be like responses. So like imagine a book, but like every few paragraphs is another person writing it. And you know, doing that gave me the confidence to write really well and to make like express really like you know things inside my head, like deep stories and you know big fantasy things. And one day, like you know, that led me to just writing Forgive Us. And I just like I've written stories before Forgive Us, but they never like went anywhere. Um, so I just wrote Forgive Us like I put a, put a chapter down, and then yeah, like I just continue writing from there. Um, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, I just talk until you've exhausted your process, and I'll interject because I've got about 90 minutes
Okay.
slotted for this. We could go a little bit longer than that if you need to. We can go a little bit less,
Okay.
if it's getting too long.
Yeah. So I transitioned from Starcraft to Steam to Discord, and all along the way, like I tried to write books and just never worked. And during those years, like also like I was going through like you know general education, you know like grade school, middle school, then high school. Transitioning to like high school was a painful experience because it went from being homeschooled, which I had been homeschooled for like a few years, like since I was 6, to like going to online school. So I actually had like a set textbook I had to read and a set course I had to do and finish by a certain time. Um, well, not like I could finish it whatever I wanted, but there was really like a set date in my head that I had to finish it at. Like I had like I told myself I had to finish this time, or my dad would be like, you know, you have to finish this now, like you know, like at this time. I'd be like, okay, I got you, I can do that. And I've been in 2 online high schools. One was really stupid, and the other one was great. My first online high school was University of Texas High School, which is out of the University of Texas, and it was okay. Like it was one of those things where like the links never worked. There was typos in the text, and the tests were weird. It was one of those things. But what was really stupid about that school is when I did final exams, they would take me to a testing center, which completely defeated the purpose of being online school. You're
Right.
supposed to do it all at home.
Yeah.
So doing final exams, like by so 1 second. Doing final exams by I had to do them by hand, right? Somebody would be watching you do them by hand. So what would happen is I would have really good test scores at home, and then my final exams would come back like 30% down from what I usually get. Like I would usually get like a 90 or 100, and I would get 70% like barely pass. So, in order to like we like figured out like something's happening. We figured out oh I have to like write, and we you know we knew from like when I was really young that I didn't like pencils. I still don't like pencils. Um, so we had me taken in to do like kind of like a I don't really remember it because it was like an hour of my life when I was a bit younger. They had me like go into a building. I met this really nice woman who like um just gave me a bunch of things to do. Like we sat down at a desk and she gave me like some like puzzles to put together and some shapes, like kind of like kindergarten. It was really funny. And then I had to do some like problem questions. She tested out my vocabulary, totally nailed the vocabulary. Some writer. And then she had me the most important thing I remember, she had me write an essay in 2 forms. They had me write an essay on a piece of paper with a pencil, and then on a laptop. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get this. So I like wrote the essay on the paper, and I had like a set amount of time. I didn't finish like the first paragraph of the essay by the time the time was up. Right, I can't do it. And then and I wrote on the keyboard on the laptop. boom, like just like half the time that I had like a set amount of time. It took me half of that to finish. And she was like, okay, like I know what's wrong. You had dysgraphia. Up until then, I just thought I sucked with pencils.
Mm.
She gave
So
me like a real diagnosis, like you have dysgraphia, like there's something wrong like neurally with these like your hands. I can't write left-handed, I can't write right-handed, and it actually causes me pain right
mhm.
around here when I hold a pencil. And she just gave me like a formal diagnosis. And then afterwards, when I did final exams, they put me in front of a computer. So instead of being in a big room with like other people and being like really nervous, you get to be in a really tiny room with a computer and a camera behind you, which is even more nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
But I got better test scores. So like it just like being able to the keyboards allowed me to express myself way better. Like I prefer having a conversation through a keyboard than talking sometimes because I when I talk I get ahead of myself, but writing lets me pace myself.
One of the, I think one of the failures of the modern school system, or of the school system in general, is that they often let those kind of learning disabilities to go unchecked for so long, and it seems like they would be able to figure out something like that a lot sooner.
It's a failure to adapt. I have many really bad opinions about education in general. Um, it's a waste of time, that kind of stuff. For me, it was a waste of time. Like English classes were the worst for me because it was a complete opposite of creative writing. It was formal college style writing versus like writing a book. And it took me a long time to do those classes and they got in the way from me. I didn't really learn anything either, except that the color red's important in this poem. But, like there's a lot wrong with the American education system. It fails to adapt a lot.
Yeah.
It really cannot adapt because many people describe it as a factory setting. It kind of is like a bunch of kids lined up, perfect, neat little rows. And they all get the same thing, and they all have to succeed at the same thing.
Well, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but it's my understanding that it was created during the Revolution
Oh yeah,
to get people programmed to be able to become factory workers,
yeah, and
and it's never really evolved from that.
yeah. And I think that kind of like kind of tie into my second book here with Abandon Us. Like I don't really understand government too much. I'm not super into politics, but like what I kind of see is like a failure to adapt. Like governments and education systems and criminal systems all fail to adapt to modern times, right? And adapt to the movement
Well,
and fluctuation of culture and
even
technology is
even think
faster.
about the. Sorry to interrupt you,
It's
but
okay.
to think about the scientific process, the scientific community, or um, the academic community. Those two communities right there uh, have really hard time adapting and changing to new things, new concepts. So it's yeah, it is. I think it's a human nature thing. You get this group thing going, and people are so comfortable in their situation that to change is too scary for them. Um, we could talk all about that stuff, but that's kind of boring stuff, really. So, uh,
I can only show you an example of it.
in your book, I don't want to
No,
give
in
any
my
spoilers.
life, in my life.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah,
You have an example of it?
I do have an example.
Oh, okay. Well, go ahead.
So I do grappling, I do jujitsu and judo, which are both grappling arts. There's no like striking or anything. We like throw each other and choke each other, and that's why my hands hurt all the time. Part of the reason I have dysgraphia is because my hands are so swollen. Um, but there's really thin divisions between each grappling art, like wrestling and judo and stuff. It's all like throw 'em, choke 'em. But they like to make really like really hard lines. And the only like real grappling sport that I've seen that hasn't done that is jiu-jitsu, because jiu-jitsu kind of uses everything from everybody else. But every time I go to like a judo club or something and I do some jiu-jitsu on them, they're like, "Oh, no jujitsu here, you know, or they'll like I'll do something that isn't quite normal and they just freak out about it. It's not like part of that group of sphere. Okay, I see somebody has asked me a question.
Yeah, people listening want to hear about the post-apocalyptic genre. So let's.
Let's switch to that.
This is first of all, Scott Brown's a friend of mine, and appreciate you being here, Scott. Thank you. So Scott says, can you ask him? It's E.T. by the way. Can you ask him if he's heard of an amazing post-apocalyptic book called Swan Song by Robert Mc, McCammon, one of his favorites.
Ooh, I've never heard of that book. I just looked it up on Amazon. It looks really interesting.
So let
I
me
might
let
have
me
something to
follow
put on
that
my
up
wish list.
with, um, have you done a lot of reading of the post-apocalyptic genre?
The way so the way like when I write and I get inspiration is actually not through reading. It's usually from gaming or movies. Um, there are like a few influences for Forgive Us. There's like 2 movies and like 3 games. But my favorite apocalyptic book so far, like I don't have any. Like I do like I can be smug and say like mine, but like that's because I understand the world and everything. But I think like the closest one would have to be The Sheep Look Up because it's very similar to my book. Um, I'm not a fan of the writing, but it's a similar world. The way I don't think its story is strong, but the way it like shows the reader the world is very, very interesting. It kind of hits you with a brick a little bit, but like once you kind of understand the flow of how the book wants to talk to you, then it's a really interesting book. I think I forgot the name of it. It's called the author. It's called The Sheep Look Up though.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, the way I get inspiration for writing and world building is from games and movies and you know that writing. Um, I do read some fiction books from game series, but not a lot.
So, and a lot of your reading, I take it, was um, through playing the video games and getting those quests, because
Oh yeah,
those quests, especially in World of Warcraft, are pretty well researched and documented. I mean, they give you a ton of background on their
oh
quests.
yeah,
I actually
and
played the game um, years ago. I haven't played it for a long time, but
don't
I
play.
did
It'll take
enjoy
your
it.
soul. It'll take your
Oh,
soul. It took my soul for seven
it
years.
does, man. It does. I also played another game that you enjoyed, Fallout.
Fallout. So there are entire YouTube channels dedicated to describing the lore and having theories in like games like Fallout. Like a lot of my favorite lore videos are about Fallout. So that's where I usually get my inspiration. Um, like for example, Forgive Us, in its early stages was inspired by Fallout and a movie called Nine, which they say is a kids movie. It's not a kids movie at all. It's really creepy, but it's a really good movie.
It is a
Um,
cool movie.
it is a
It's
cool
it's
movie.
kind of hard to get it though, man, because there's
It's weird.
really no talking in it, is there?
Not as much as
Yeah.
most movies. But yeah, like, what was I gonna say? In Forgive Us, the civilizations that I show are actually inspired by civilizations like the NCR and Caesar's Legion in Fallout New Vegas, which is
Okay.
the best Fallout. Um,
I can't debate that with you because I've only played the original and the second one.
you play Fallout 1?
Yeah.
I do like Fallout 1. It's
Yeah.
it's really since I'm young, like I'm used to like the 3D worlds and the shooters and stuff. So it's hard to play like the turn-based.
Yeah.
Um,
I have a lot of
games, but
friends who play. Isn't there Fallout 4 out right now, or it's
there's
been out
Fallout
for
4 and 76,
76?
and
That's the one I'm
yep,
thinking of. That's an MMO, right?
kind of it's terrible. It's more like a MMO mixed with glitches.
Okay,
Yeah.
I've heard that.
There's Fallout has a style, it has a theme, it has like you can be good or bad. You can do really, really, really cruel things in Fallout in like 1, 2, and New Vegas. but the game is made by like Fallout's currently owned by Bethesda, who made Skyrim. Bethesda does not understand Fallout at all. Like Fallout 4 and 76 are really like ill representations compared to New Vegas or 1 and 2. They really
Mhm.
don't get the game. They don't let you be a bad guy. They don't have complex writing. It's just eh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's what got you into uh, Norse mythology and pagan studies?
I'm Swedish.
Oh,
That's
okay.
why. Yeah,
Is
so
that
it's
so? Were you born in Sweden?
no, I do think I have the citizenship, but I'm actually born in Colorado.
Oh, okay.
Funny enough, I was born next to the Olympic Training Center in Colorado. There's like a hospital right next to it. And I would later in my life end up training there and then leave really angrily, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
Um, but
So
yeah,
did you grow up the first few years of your life speaking? What's the language they speak?
Swedish.
Swedish. Okay.
I'm
Um,
half illiterate.
is that your primary language?
No, English is. I'm
Oh,
half
okay.
illiterate in Swedish because there's nobody really to talk Swedish to except my parents.
Ah,
You don't really need like a lot of like Swedish to like, like I can understand a lot of Swedish, but I kind of embarrassing that like I don't really know it too well, but I do understand like I have like faint understandings of like many languages. Like I kind of understand Old Norse, I kind of understand Swedish, and I do understand a little bit of Icelandic.
hmm.
Yeah, the my interest in like Norse mythology and Norse culture and stuff kind of comes from a multitude of things. If I recall correctly, my dad used to read books to me when I was younger. For example, he read to me the Dark Tower series, which I really, really fundamentally believe that it was an unconscious influence for Forgive Us. I really,
Well,
totally,
it
the
is a
Gunslinger definitely was.
post-apocalyptic. It's a post-apocalyptic series.
hmm
Um,
But like, he read to me the myths when I was younger, all the myths like the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. And for those of you who don't know what that is a collection of Norse, like the Norse stories, written down about 200 years after the Viking Age by Christian priests. So they saved the myths and a little bit changed them to not get them burned. But those are like my dad used to read to me those stories, and then like occasionally like Vikings are really like romanticized now, and when I was younger like I would see that and be like, oh, cool. And I watched like How to Train Your Dragon, which was one of like the little keys to leading me into that. And then one day I got a book by I think Stephen A. Flowers, who is an academic, um, who he there's I forgot the name of the book. Essentially, there are these tomes, grimoires, whatever you like to call them, in Iceland, consisting of a bunch of spells.
hmm.
And he wrote a few books detailing each of them and putting them together. And one day I like asked my like I saw something like that, asked my dad if I could have one of those. He gave me three books, two which was by that a guy, another guy with another book which was called Trolldom, which is literally the best book ever. Um, Stephen Flower
Say the name of that book again. I didn't quite get it.
Trolldom. Do you want me to go get it? I can go grab it.
So like kingdom, but
Yeah, Trolldom.
trolldom.
Yeah,
Okay, got it.
yeah. Which is it's like an old Swedish folk magic.
Well, when you give it props, like it's the best book ever,
It's the best
you
book
know,
ever.
so people
On
might want
that
to go look
topic,
it up.
on that topic,
Okay.
I think um I think the author is called Johannes Gordbrook. Gordbrook, I think. Johannes. Trolldom by Johannes. Army on the Dead on Netflix. I have not seen The Army of the Dead on Netflix. You recommend?
I do. I liked it, but I'm a big Dave Batista fan and zombie fan, and I live in Vegas, so
Oh,
it checks three good boxes for me. It was I wouldn't give it 10 out of 10 stars, but it was a good movie, and it's on. I think it's on Netflix.
I wrote a
Right,
zombie short story, by the way.
a zombie short story. Awesome.
Yeah, and I showed it to three friends of mine. Well, my girlfriend and two other friends, and I think all of them got nightmares from
Oh wow, it
it.
was that scary, huh?
It wasn't scary to me when I wrote it, but I guess the concept of how I described the zombies was really scary.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite author?
Tolkien, the
Oh,
guy who
cool.
wrote Middle Earth.
Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit.
The Hobbit was a really good book. The Hobbit, I think, for for modern times is it's a good read. Like it's something that everybody can like wrap their heads around. But I think when it comes to like the Lord of the Rings, the books are really good. Like they are good, but they're written by like an academic, so they're really hard to understand. They're very complex. Like it's not like quite, like it's not easy to read. So I think kind of like the movies, the extended versions of the movies are an easier way to kind of like get into the apple and buy
Absolutely.
into it. But I like Tolkien a lot.
I agree with you 100%. I love the movies. I've never read the books.
Oh, the books are evil.
So,
They're so hard
I
to read.
mean, they're like, what, 10,000 pages each?
Yeah.
Probably not that bad, but
They're like 600 each.
yeah,
And
they're
also
huge.
like there's a few more books like The Fall of Gondolin, The Unfinished Tales. Like I have those books and those are also really hard to read. Um so yeah, Tolkien, my favorite author. I'm like basically worship him because he is, the grandfather of modern like fantasy pop culture. Like he's responsible for games like, World of Warcraft. But
100%.
his writing is really, really, really hard to read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a good question. Thank you, Santa Maria. Um, and Scott says, good choice. I agree. Could you talk about your fantasy world at 80 time? Can we put a pin in that one because I want to get to that when we start talking more about the book.
Yeah, we
Um,
can put a pin
but
in that.
yeah, you created your own world based on the post-apocalyptic uh, background, and I do want to get into that, man. But I want to save that for a little bit later.
Okay.
So let's fast forward a little bit. Maybe we'll come back and talk about Norse mythology a little bit more if we have more time, and if they want to hear more about it. Um, but so forgive us. I wrote a little summary for myself, or based on what I've heard. I listened to the audiobook, and I haven't finished it yet, so no spoilers. But uh, a post-apocalyptic fiction in a world devastated by natural and man-made catastrophes, fraught with danger and mystery, an expose on the brutality of the wasteland with a message of hope and redemption. Is that pretty accurate? Would you
Oh yeah,
say?
that's accurate. Yeah.
Cool. Go ahead.
Okay, so I would actually like to describe the world of Forgive Us a little bit. I won't give spoilers such as the names of civilizations or how they came to be. I'm just gonna talk about the world. So the world of Forgive Us, how it was created, kind of came out of just like I'm bored of this genre and I'm bored of this genre. Um, when I sat down to write it, like I thought about it, like, what's a kind of like an underdog, um, like what's an underdog genre? So like nuclear post-apocalyptic fiction, everybody's done that. And plus like Fallout has like completely dominated that. Or like zombies, everybody's done zombies. Even I've done zombies. So I thought about like what's something that's like a subtle danger that we don't really think about. And I eventually settled on like, pollution. And then like the world kind of like slowly built itself. People like people in the chat are like asking about like added some. My high fantasy world, this I'm gonna make a comparison. My medieval high fantasy world has been in the works for like 4 years, right? And I haven't worked on it in a while, but like when I start making books with it, I have a world prepared. But while writing Forgive Us, the world was built with the book. So like there's a few regrets of mine that I have in Forgive Us, like a few inconsistencies. For example, the world the world of Forgive Us, for example, the main character Oliver grew up in the old world, which was civilization. Um, During that time, there was things like resource wars. There was major pollution. For example, have you ever been like a snowy area and like shoveled all the snow up into big piles to let them melt? Okay, imagine that with garbage.
Hmm.
Like cities were overflowing with garbage, and it's kind of shown in Abandon Us. But I didn't really show that in Forgive Us. And also like the wasteland itself, it's very sandy because there's no plants, there's no trees. Like the majority of forests are like graveyards for like twiggy and bony trees. Like if you ever been to an aftermath of like a forest fire where you have just like a bunch of green and then a bunch of dead trees, just like kind of like white and sun bleached and stuff. Imagine that, but like without the plants, just the trees and sand. Right?
Have
That's
you
like
ever seen the movie The Road?
I don't think I've ever seen the movie.
Oh, okay. Well, it was a book, and we'll get back to your story, but the movie The Road is what I'm visualizing from what you're describing of the world.
I will watch that. I will. That sounds like something I should watch. So for the wasteland, there's no trees, there's no plants, and what I missed to describe and Forgive Us is that the wasteland is not only very sandy, there's also like trash everywhere. Um, in different since Forgive Us takes time place in like different times, like like 50 or 20 years after the apocalypse, 100, 150. Um, you don't really get to see this, but I feel like I kind of miss this in Oliver's. Like walking around the wasteland, you would see like you'd be on a road that's covered in sand, and then you would look around, there's ruins that are half buried by sand. There's tilted over power poles. It's really like windy all the time. It's really windy. And there would be garbage everywhere. Um, I think by the time of Oliver, it would be kind of like towards the end of that, towards the end where like sand's starting to like envelop ruins and stuff. So there would not be like a lot of garbage, but it would be like a very destroyed planet. Like the sky has a big pollution haze. It's kind of like black, really dark, like an artist painted it with like black charcoal. Um, as time progresses in Forgive Us, as you go further on in the future, the haze is thinner and thinner. And then in the third book, which is the sequel to Forgive Us, it will be pretty much gone. But for like Oliver's world, like he lives in a very cold world. And that's like another aspect. Like people like to talk about global warming and climate change. And like back in the day it used to be like global cooling, right? And, the planet fluctuates. But for this, like this is like a real like man-made catastrophic like ecosystem like destruction, right? The reason all the plants are dead and stuff is because of the toxic pollution that humans created. And also because there's no sunlight. It's really dark all the time. When it's sunny, it's like, like a sunny day when it's cloudy. It's never really a lot of light. So a lot of plants died out. Where was I going with this? So yeah, Forgive Us. The world was created. It was created like together with the book, and I didn't really put like a lot of like behind the scenes thoughts. Like the thoughts came out during, during the times of the paper. Um, so there were resource shortages. There was plagues. There's all sorts of things like when I'm writing for Abandon Us, like when I think about like what destroys civilization, like I would imagine it would be like a lot of things, right? So in Abandon Us, there's like wars. Oh, there's Trolldom, by the way, for those who are interested. There's wars. There's the pollution. Like everybody has to wear a mask because the air is just toxic. It's just breathing. Like if you were to breathe it in, it'd feel like you'd be in a paint shop. It'd be really like painful to breathe in. And then there's also like pandemics. There are, because there's at the time of like the old world's collapse, like our population right now is like what, 9 million? 9 billion, sorry.
It's close to, yeah.
9 billion.
I think it's almost 8 billion actually.
Eight
If
billion, yeah.
if it's over 8 billion, I haven't. I need to check.
So the population at the time of like when Oliver was young and in the old world, like it was close to like 15 to 16 billion. Like there is a lot of people. And at the same time, like technology like progressed. There's a time when like there's a fictional energy source in the book called ignium, which is kind of like I didn't describe it very well and forgive us. It's pretty much like a plasma electricity. So instead of having wires, you kind of have like pipes for it. It's really like malleable. It's really easy to make. its one downside, of course, is it's toxic. When you have like a watch, it kind of like emits a little bit of toxin and goes up in the air and goes in the ground and stuff. Um, so like the invention of ignium changed like at the world at the time of the creation of ignium. Most like everybody would be driving electric cars. Like it would be the electric age. When ignium is invented, it becomes popular, then it replaces all electricity. Like solar panels and windmills and electric cars are all replaced by like ignium generator plant, like ignium power plants and ignium powered cars, like everything, because it's such an easy energy source. Like a lot of people like to think when they're thinking about advanced civilizations, they think they have really good power sources, like alien civilizations with like Dyson spheres that can like encase suns. So ignium's kind of like at that point like humanity's like golden power, but it's toxic and it helps lead technology along, right? With a really like easy power source to manipulate, technology like grows even faster than it is now. So pretty much mass production comes focus to invention, which increases like the field of medicine gets really advanced, food production gets really advanced, so the population skyrockets. And then at the same time, the world becomes polluted. And with that many people, they begin producing trash. Everybody's using ignium, so the sky starts to get that pollution haze I described. And slowly but surely, the air becomes toxic. So then plants start dying, and like massive parts of like the agricultural parts of the U.S. begin dying too. So you have like 14 billion people, and major farms are just dying out. So they move agriculture into greenhouse skyscrapers, where they grow food, they harvest it, refine it into like kind of like cubed foods. So they like take out like pretty much like all the they really refine it down so it can last for a long time.
So it's just straight nutrient,
No, like it
no,
doesn't taste
not
good.
enjoyable to eat at all.
No, not at all. So it's like stale popcorn. So of course, like those greenhouses help sustain the population, but the population keeps growing. So there becomes resource shortages. First, it starts with food, then water, because there's so many people that you have to have so many power plants. Because water is you have to clean it first, so you have to have so many cleaning plants to deal with that many people. And then at the same time, like technology, like robotics progresses, right? And you already see this now. Like when I go to Taco Bell, I don't have to talk to somebody and order food. I can just go on a little screen, right? So that happens everywhere. So people lose their jobs, and employment, like unemployment, just spikes with the population. So like in the 2070s is really bad. Like I think the highest unemployment rate in the U.S. was during the Great Depression. I think it was like 25%, like a quarter of the population. In Forgive Us and Abandon Us, it's like it gets up to like 65%, right? Like most people, like despite the there's like so much technology, there's so much good medicine, all that, most people are still like dying of the cold because like the common flu, because they're out on the streets, they don't have anywhere to live, right? They can't afford anything, they can't work, right? And they're like they're angry, right? Because they don't have they can't work, so they can't feed themselves, they can't feed their families. And most people, like, either they freeze to death because of the pollution haze, like blocking out the sun. It gets really cold, like especially during the winter. Like a bad winter would become like -40, like the central U.S. So people freeze to death. They become sick, and then eventually countries begin to run out of resources. They can't sustain their economies. They can't sustain all that kind of like they can't sustain what they have. So out of desperation, they look to other countries. Other countries are already like mad at each other. They look to other countries, all that sort of stuff. And like, for example, Germany starts. Germany goes straight up the top, and goes to Scandinavia to hit like Norway for their oil. Or China and the U.S. They
So
just
the
hate each other.
the energy wars start again.
Pretty much not for energy, but just for like timber and stuff.
Okay,
Like for example,
resources.
China invades Russia for some of the last timber in the world, because Russia has, most of their forests have died, but some of them are still alive and dying too. So they get invaded for their timber and stuff. So after a while, like, countries eventually like give up on things like the Geneva Conventions to win wars. So they drop chemical bombs. They drop my favorite, which are mutagenic bombs, which I'll describe in a moment. And then sometimes, not frequently, because I didn't want Forgive Us to be like a nuclear apocalypse, occasionally they'll drop like nukes. Like 5 nukes were dropped on the U.S., um, which is not really spoilers. It's just what happened.
Mhm.
Not described in Forgive Us. So countries just give up on the Geneva Conventions, and then with all those combined forces, like sickness, like starvation, like pretty much like plague and sadness and everything like that, the wars, eventually everything falls apart, right? Like, um, peoples in, um, peoples in under certain governments, they overthrow their governments because their governments are killing them, or some countries like the US and China are so big that when they fight each other, they pretty much exhaust their economies. So the fighting just goes, right? They both hit each other really, really hard at the end, and then that's it. They got nothing more. Like their economies can't keep them up, right?
Let me interject a question real quick because this is very detailed and it sounds like it could be almost prophetic because we could be heading in that direction right now with no turning back. What is it that compelled you to take these paths? Did you just talk about the process of how you came up with all of these ideas and put them into place?
I really tried to apply like logic. Like I really don't know politics. I don't know like how any government in Europe works. I really don't know how like socialist governments work or how like the Russian government works. Like I kind of sometimes struggle with how like the American government works, but I try and like go off like the news I hear now and what I think could happen, right? So I kind of like create like a second Cold War between China and the US based on the Cold War. We're probably actually having one right now. We just don't know it. Um, Probably the reason we knew about the Cold War back in the day is because I don't know, nobody likes communism. So we're probably having Cold War now. So I like try and go off of logic, like what would what would Russia do? What would China do? What would happen in Europe? And like there's some biases, like the wars that happen, the resource wars that happen in Europe are simply because I go off the like one quote. Europeans are good at killing other Europeans. That's just plain and simple how it is. Europe is very good at war.
Yeah,
Um, so Europe
that's
just
true. Is
blows
that an
itself.
actual quote that somebody said?
No, that's my own quote.
That you came up
Actually, I
with?
think I've heard it in the video. Kind of like one of those channels like gives you history, but like in a really calm, chill manner. So they'll say
Yeah,
like funny things like that. It's true. Europeans are really good at
no
killing
doubt,
other Europeans.
no doubt. They've been warring in Europe for millennia.
And Germany is the scariest, which is why I have Germany be the primary contender for European resource wars. Because like think about it, like Germany back in the day, they were nailing Roman legions to trees. And then they were, I think, I don't quite know this part of the history, Rome, like the Holy Roman Empire, its seat of power was in Germany. And then we have World War One, World War Two. Like I think about like World War Two. Isn't it crazy that Germany had the power to like hold off literally everybody for like a few months?
Hmm.
Like most countries would just get clapped. But like they held off the Soviet Union, the Americans, like the British, like everybody at the same time for like a few months at least. Like that's crazy.
Yeah,
Crazy. So Germany is like my like big military contender for like Europe. So like building this kind of stuff, like it might happen, it might not happen, but I think it's like logically what would happen, right? If they were desperate, if
well,
they needed something.
because you got down into some really detailed um, information, like the the power source that you said was created. Uh, there there is like a really big push to find this new power source, and a lot of people think that it might be based on this element 115, which is a new element, relatively new element. But they think there is speculation that this element came from a UFO, a crashed UFO. I mean,
Yep.
that's a big conspiracy theory. Have you ever heard of Bob Lazar?
No.
Okay, I don't want to go down the UFO rabbit hole, but
There's
it just struck a chord with me because that this power source sounds to me, it really resonated with me as something similar to this element 115. And if you want to research it, you can look it up. But
I can find it.
yeah,
I can tell you the inspiration for ignium. Um, ignium. I kind of struggled with ignium at first because I didn't really know what I wanted it to be. So in Forgive Us, I kind of left it like vague. In Abandon Us, is more described. Um, Essentially, I originally ignium was based off of like Fallout's like nuclear energy. Like they have like fusion battery fission. I'm not quite. I don't remember like the difference between fission and fusion. Essentially, they have like nuclear batteries. They have cars that can run for like 400 years. So I wanted something like a cool energy source like that. So at first, like it was inspired off of that, and then it kind of became inspired off of nuclear energy again, but this time in real life. If I remember correctly, there's a certain element that's really good for like nuclear energy, and it's all like there's not a lot of it on Earth, but there's a bunch of it on the moon,
oh
and
yeah,
they're thinking about like sending ships up to mine it, but don't mind the moon, it looks pretty. But it kind of became more inspired off of that, and then it kind of took like in Abandon Us, it took a more fantasy approach where I kind of went with like a plasma. It's not really a plasma, it's kind of like it's weird. It's like kind of like a liquid electricity. So for example, like if a pipe of ignium were to break, it would flow out at the same time. It would shoot sparks and have like electrical ignium arcs. Like how like a Tesla is, where the
yeah,
arcs. It would
yeah.
have that, so it would spew out and shoot arcs everywhere. Essentially, when ignium pipes break, like if it were to break against a wall, it would just burn up a whole wall.
So
Like it would just char
this
it.
is something you made up. You made all this
Yeah.
up. God, that's so creative, man. I mean, it's blowing me away because it's so creative. But okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I probably do that a little bit, but continue, please. And
No, it's okay.
I'm getting crap from the chat room because I talked about UFOs. I talk about UFOs almost every episode, so
I
you got to
mean,
forgive
isn't
me
that?
about that.
You know what? I can go with space a little bit. There is some space stuff in Forgive Us. I'm not gonna spoil the story or anything like that, but I'm going to spoil some of the space stuff. So, I'm still working on it, but during like kind of like the mid 2070s, the apocalypse is in 2079. Um, on January 1st because that's a really cool date on New Year's. Before that, a bunch of governments kind of banded together, kind of like the scientific parts, like NASA and that sort, and they decided to create ships, big ships. For example, like the Arcata station featured in Forgive Us, and they essentially made like a giant fleet, which would be divided in half, somewhat. So only a very select few groups of people would be allowed on these ships, and these ships would begin with like populations of 200 people. They would be able to sustain like 1,000 or 2,000, and at that point, that would be really far in the future, and they would have systems in place like kind of governmental systems in the ships to dedicate how populations would be controlled. Because you don't want 3,000 people on a ship that can only support 2,000. That's not good. Kind of like how Earth is at that point. Um, so half these ships would be sent off into space, probably on suicide missions. And they would go and try and find new Earths. And if they found a new Earth, they wouldn't come back, but they would like send a signal to Earth and be like, "Hey, if you guys are still alive, come over here, let's go destroy this place instead, because the world is my garbage can because I am man. And then the other half would orbit Earth. And a lot of these ships would be lied to, and like by like the last like governments on Earth during the apocalypse, they would be told that Earth's like uninhabitable, right? Like you guys can't come back. So they would orbit Earth for centuries. Like a bunch of them would remain on like orbiting up till like the ship falls apart, while a few would come back to Earth. Um, so these ships would like monitor Earth, see if it's like okay to come back and like fix it up again. And of course, there's some like shortcomings of like the governments at that time. For example, um, oh, sorry, I had to burp. For example, if the ships would come back and resettle Earth, then they would use ignium again. Then the population would get really big. Then ignium toxins would be dumped all over the planet again, and then the same would happen again. So that's like a few shortcomings like that, right? So they didn't quite know um, everything, but they had like some like plans. So only like a few, like out of like 16 billion people, like only like 3,000 people would be allowed to leave Earth, right? And all these launchings would not be like the governments would not tell anybody, because if you told the general population that a bunch of people got to leave Earth and got to live on like nice ships and stuff, and we're all down here, they would be really, really mad. So all these launchings are kept secret. And then Earth falls apart, and then those ships get to orbit. There's another thing I wanted to talk about earlier with the wars, the resource wars, the mutagenic bombs. Would you like to hear about that?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I just sent out a Twitter post to tell people that we're listening to a master storyteller.
Master storyteller, master
Yeah,
storyteller.
telling stories about the apocalypse, and
It
it's
just sticks in my head.
fascinating, man. It is it is so interesting and so creative. There are elements of other books and movies that I've seen throughout my life, but you've weaved it all together and made a futuristic apocalyptic story that is pretty unique. It's
Oh
very,
yeah.
very cool.
There's a lot of shortcomings in my book. For example, in Forgive Us, why are there so few robots? There's only one robot mentioned in the whole book, and it's towards the end of the book. Why are there so few robots? Like that's there's a few shortcomings, but yeah, I try to like make the world like unique. Like I wouldn't want somebody to read it and be like, I read this story before. Just the all the characters had different names. Like that would be kind of depressing. Um, so yeah, I wanted to tell you about the mutagenic bombs. Um, really, really weird inspiration for them was Adventure Time. Adventure Time is like a kids show I grew up with, like kind of as a teenager. It's a really interesting show. Like it would be hard for like adults to watch it because you would have to suffer through the first 3 seasons, where like the first 3 seasons are really a kids show. Like it grabbed like a young audience. But what's special about Adventure Time is the writing and the characters matured with the audience. So the main character Finn, like at the time of like the beginning of the show, was like 12, and like most audience members would be like 12 or 14 at that time. And then as the voice actor grew, the character grew, and the writing grew, and it became a really good story. But that's not really important now. What's interesting is in Adventure Time is kind of a post-apocalyptic fantasy story, where it's like with medieval fantasy. Basically, there's this thing called the Great Mushroom War. Totally not a nuclear war or anything. That destroy the planet and reset it pretty much. So essentially, there's laws of gravity now. Things get hot, things get cold. Basic, basic physics. In Adventure Time, there's this thing called the Great Mushroom Bomb or the Great Bomb. I forgot that let out this entity called the Lich, which is an undead entity. And with this bomb, it pretty much changed how the world functions. So magic and fantasy could exist. So introduce all that stuff. It also put a big hole in the earth. Um, so there are like a lot of ruins in Adventure Time. Like, the Earth's completely regrown, the continent's been reshaped, but there's like ruins and occasionally there are like things from the past, like just like mildly disturbing. It's not really scary, but for example, things called oozers, which are misshapen humans. They don't have faces anymore. Pretty much they're like bodies, and then they have holes where like radioactive and toxic stuff just oozes out of them. That's why they're called oozers. So this was the inspiration for the mutagenic bombs in Forgive Us. So essentially, not entirely sure how they would work, but I came up with an idea. Essentially, they're bombs that drop gas. They pretty much, when they hit the ground, they explode and make gas. Some of them dropped without exploding, and if you touch one, they blast you in the face. But this gas is not like, it's not like a toxic gas. It's not like mustard gas or like anything like that. It doesn't taste like anything. It doesn't smell like anything. I don't know what color it is. I think I'm gonna give it a color. But essentially, it's just DNA. And what happens is when you breathe it in, your body absorbs it through the lungs and through the stomach or everywhere else it would absorb it. And the brain would be tricked by all this DNA it's given. And then it would be given like a bunch of instructions from all sorts of things. Octopuses, horses, dogs, other humans, like just random instructions. So what would happen is, it's really like engineered. It's not like random. It's really engineered. For example, it hits the brain, pretty much destroys the brain because the brain grows a bunch of tumors because it has a bunch of lumps that just grow, and that destroys brain function. And generally, most people die from that. A lot of people go crazy from that, and a lot of people become, I think the word would be catatonic. They would just cease function and become vegetables, and then they would die. But also their bodies would be affected too. They would grow extra limbs. They would grow like hooves, random things all over, and they would be really lumpy because of all of like the tumors that would grow on them. So essentially, like the mutagenic bombs are just instruction bombs. They just trick the body into thinking it has to build more. Because like when you grow, like your body has instructions: grow, 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 grow. Reach this point, you're an adult, right? But it eventually ceases growing. You don't grow extra fingers and stuff. But what the mutagenic bombs does, it just turns that off, and then gives a bunch of instructions, and then the body falls apart. So the mutants in Forgive Us, like, they're generations after this. When generally the Chinese were the ones who dropped these mutagenic bombs, and then they would occasionally hit, and they would have populations, and most people would die or fall apart from it. Some would survive and starve to death and freeze to death, but those that did survive, many would grow into packs because generally humans like to be in groups, right? Safe in numbers. I think that's really like a basic survival thing. These packs would come together, they would hunt down humans, and they would eat them, right? And then, of course, they wouldn't just eat humans, they're not zombies. They would go in grocery stores. Entire grocery stores would be ransacked, not from human survivors, but from like hungry mutants. Like mutants that like are smart enough to break open cans and drink them, or
Do
mutants that
they
can open bags of chips.
do they have any logic, or are they just
Depends. It really
okay?
depends on the state that they're in. Like
Mhm.
some are just so far gone that they wander around and they attack anything they see, or they'll some just sit and
Primal instinct.
bonk their heads against walls because
Yeah.
they don't know. Some would be really smart, and some would be even smarter than smart. They would, a lot of like the packs that survive into like Forgive Us, from Abandon Us into Forgive Us, a lot of those packs that survive are smart. They know how to they don't like go straight at you like zombies. They will wait. They will wait for you to take a break. They will wait for you to look like just lose focus, and they would surround you, right? You might have one that comes at you. You might shoot at it, and it might like scurry off. I'm okay now. Like I shot at it, and then there would be three behind you, right? And then they would take you down. Like it's not like zombies are just eating humans. Like at this point, you're the gazelle, and you
So
just got
they've
tricked.
developed some pack mentality, so they
Hmm.
can hunt prey.
Yeah. So on Forgive Us, like sometimes they're featured, and a lot of times like it's really random. It's not like they create sets like in zombie games. You have like boomers like in Left 4 Dead and tanks, and you have these sets. And this is just random. Like you have some which they bulk up to like immense sizes, and they just wander around, you know. if they hit you in the head, like your head will probably come clean off, right? And some are like, like twisted and that kind of stuff, and they don't move very well, and they have like many legs that don't function. They're really heavy and lopsided because all the growth went here. Some would be like, they would be stronger, faster, better, and they would be in packs, right? And of course, like an entire ecosystem forms from this. There's other mutants from zoos and stuff, which I'll get into in a second. But an ecosystem would form from this, where like there would be human mutants who hunt each other, and those who would become prey, and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like an omnivore hellscape of like creatures that can eat anything. They'll hunt each other. There's like the cities have like at nights, like even like 100 years into the future, they have like mutants that like at night they come out, they do their things. There's some that run around and some that wander, and there would be like hunts. And I don't know why, I just kind of added the trait where a lot of them don't like the sunlight. Probably because a lot of them turned during times when it was polluted, dark. Uh, Oh, another thing I want to say. So in the early times, it would just be like chaos, like a really like a bag of luck of what happens to what, and who becomes what. Really, it's a fate worse than death, because it could be anything, right? You could like fall apart after a few years because the mutagenic stuff just mutates you until your body falls apart, or your heart can't sustain it, or anything like that. And most of them lose their minds. Um, but
Real
those that
quick,
bonded,
let
oh
me
sorry.
just give a shout out to a couple of new people that joined in. I saw Jack Ryan jumped in a few minutes ago. Um, Luis Jimenez from Unidentified Celebrity Review, awesome channel, awesome YouTube channel. Cool guy, very UFO oriented. Um, Jumped in. I thought I saw somebody else. Photo 7 was in a little while ago. And just to bring you guys up to speed, since you just dropped in, E.T. Gunnarsson is a post-apocalyptic author. Just finished or just published his first book. He's working on his second book, and he's given us a breakdown of the world and how it became a post-apocalyptic world. He has shared some really almost prophetic insights about the path that we could potentially be on and where we could end up. It's a very interesting story. I've just been letting him tell his story because it's all background stuff. It's all world building. It's um, not all of it makes it into the book because the book is a story about humans who are living in this world. But we're giving some background, some context about the world and how interesting this world is and how it ended up in this situation. So, and I mean, he's shared some incredibly imaginative ideas that are somewhat new, but somewhat innovative, where he's used ideas that have been around. But when I've referenced the stuff that it resonated with me, he had never even heard of it. So I mean, all this stuff is coming straight out of this guy's imagination, and it's just kind of mind blowing. So, and Michael Mataluni just dropped in. How you doing, Mike? Thanks for being here, you guys. So we're just getting some stories from the apocalypse from the mind of E.T. Gunnarsson. So continue.
Okay, what was I on? I was on mutagenic, like mutants and stuff.
Yeah, you'd finished talking about the mutagenic bombs and how some of them have developed a pack mentality. Others have devolved into mindless, you know, zombies almost.
Oh yeah, so one of the issues that like generally like normal zombies is they only hunt humans, and they don't go to grocery stores and eat everything there. Um, I published it myself on Amazon.
Right
Um,
on. We'll
so
go
like
into that a lot more detail later on, Scott. Um, But yeah, so go ahead, continue.
Okay. So I wanted my mutants like they will go into grocery stores or houses and they'll open cans if they can, or they open bags of chips. Like if it's food, like they'll even eat like a box of flour. Like, ew, flour. Flour's gross. Touching flour is weird. Um, and they'll drink water, and of course like water balls run out, or like big gallon balls. So they will drink like puddles from the ground. And that's another thing that kills a lot of mutants is they drink nasty polluted puddles that shreds up their insides. But a thing I wanted to mention about mutants as they like survive and progress to become part of like Earth's new ecosystem, like the majority of Earth's ecosystem, and forgive us, like the one we know, where we have bears and deer and cats and dogs and like animals that we know, those don't exist anymore, right? Like a lot of the characters in Forgive Us have never seen a horse. They've never seen like certain kinds of insects. They've never seen squirrels, right? And a lot of them have never seen like living trees. They don't know what a living tree looks like because like the pollution has made the world dead, right? No plants, barely any sunlight. The animals died too. So the human mutants, become part of Earth's new ecosystem. And there's other things, and I'll describe that in a second. But as time goes on, the mutants do reproduce, and this does help create kind of a set species. I didn't want to have like a set kind of mutant because mutants are mutants. They're not gonna have like all look the same. Like they're gonna be all different. So the packs that blend together as they survive on into time, they reproduce, which is probably the most gassy thing anybody could ever see in their life. Um, and then they would kind of create gene pools, and then they would have kind of like everything would come together.
So a new form of evolution.
Yeah, a new form of evolution. So as they reproduce and survive, some would die, and then some would be able to live and reproduce more. And as they reproduce, like also like the mutagenic stuff is still there. So a lot of the babies like that grow, like they'll grow like extra faces, like they'll have like eyes fused in their heads, like all kinds of stuff, like just gross, horrible things, tumors, but they would live. And then I'll talk a bit about Rose in a bit. Um, they would reproduce and kind of come set, but they're also like messed up. I wanted to go and talk about another part of the new ecosystem of the new world. So before the apocalypse happens, there's not a lot of animals left, as I said. There's no horses, there's no dogs, anything like that. So scientists in labs, of course, they create animals that can and will survive in the polluted. Because the wasteland exists during like the 2070s, right? There is no trees or anything like that. It's not like an after the apocalypse thing. It's before, during, and after the apocalypse that the wasteland exists. So they create these creatures that are called iron lung animals, which a few are featured in Forgive Us. So these iron lung animals are like the animals we know, like bears and oxen, cows and stuff. But instead of having a respiratory system that's attached to like the digestive system, it's completely separate, right? They only like everything that goes in their mouths is only food, so they can't choke. Um, Instead, I kind of like took a little bit of inspiration off of Avatar with the tall blue people and Pandora stuff. And they have holes in their bodies. They have breathing holes, and these holes are just filled with all sorts of anatomy. Of course, this is like in the 2070s, so like modifying how a thing is with genes and stuff, really easy, really really easy. So in the I don't know what to describe it as, an air hole,
Cavity.
air cavity. That sounds nice. Air cavity. They have all sorts of things. Our lungs have a lot of I don't know what's in our lungs actually, but essentially these things will, when air comes in, they'll grab toxins. And it depends on which kind of animal it is. Some will suck in the toxins, it'll circulate through the bloodstream, and then be ejected
Hmm.
somewhere. It will be defecated, breathed out, anything like that.
Does it
Like
eject
carbon
as
dioxide.
oxygen?
as carbon dioxide, something like that. If it's like carbon dioxide comes out, but also if it's like pollutant, it'll just go in and then it'll come out. So they'll breathe in. There's a bunch of things that'll grab the air and grab like all the toxin stuff, and then the air goes through. They breathe it in, goes into their bloodstream, and then when they exhale, carbon dioxide and pollutants come out. Or for some animals, when they breathe in, the carbon dioxide and all the toxin stuff will glow into their bloodstream, and then it will be ejected elsewhere. It will be defecated out, or any other form of that.
Okay, so it's still toxic when it comes out. It's not being processed and turned into something beneficial to the environment.
It's just they don't absorb it, and then therefore it doesn't kill them.
Okay.
So these iron lung animals, like a lot of them, like do kind of look like old world animals, the ones we know, but a lot of them look different. Some scientists, they like to play God, and they make strange animals like thresh horns are an example. Essentially, like a giant elk with like 4 horns, because the scientists thought that would look really cool. So during the apocalypse, all these animals are in zoos. They're in because zoos still have to make money even though all their animals died. Um, so also zoos have some of the last animals from the old world that didn't die, but they also have like the new animals. They would be in zoos, they'd be in labs, and then when everything falls apart, a lot of these animals would die. They would not be able to get out, but some would escape. Right? Animals do escape zoos. They do escape labs. So when they go out into the wastelands, unlike old world animals, which are already long gone, these ones can survive, right? And a lot of them, like the herbivores, when they go out into the wasteland, like a lot of them do die because there's nothing to eat. But there are things like pioneer species, really like basic plants that survive, like what's the stuff that grows in rocks called? It's
Moss,
not moss, something like that. I think
fungus.
reindeer eat them. It's kind of like a fungus. It's just like a thing that grows in rocks.
Okay.
They eat those, and then they get hunted down by predators like human mutants, and also like other iron lung animals. So combined with the human mutants and iron lung animals, this forms a completely new ecosystem. Right? And of course, there are like iron lung birds and stuff, but this forms a whole new ecosystem. And then that's the new world. That's what as pollution dies off, as there's no humans to make pollution, as it disappears and grass comes back, these are the animals who live in this world. Um,
Just thanks for joining us, Photo 7.
Goodbye,
Sorry,
photo.
sorry your internet's slow, but thanks for being here, man. You can catch the replay if you want to check it out afterwards. It'll be on YouTube.
Okay. Somebody wanted me to talk about Rose.
Yes. So she doesn't have a sister or sibling, or he doesn't have a
I do
sister
not.
or a sibling.
I am a single child. So I don't have any like anybody in my real life to inspire this little girl. So Rose is a little girl from Forgive Us. I'm not gonna tell her story. I'm just gonna tell who she is. When we first see her, she's like a 9-year-old girl who is born and raised in the new world. She's never seen trees. She's never seen any animals from the old world, and she's never seen like civilization. Reindeer eat lichen. Lichen was what I was thinking.
Okay.
Um, so Rose is actually inspired off of games, like kind of like Forgive Us was. There's this thing in gaming called the datification of games. Like there's lots of like essays and stuff on it. Essentially, imagine like the producers of World of Warcraft, like they made games like Warcraft 1, 2, and 3, which are RTS games. And these people, like when they were making games, they were like young back then. But as games and series carry on and they keep the same people with them, they become dads and stuff. So that is reflected in the writing of many, many very great games like BioShock Infinite and The Walking Dead by Telltale. The season 1, the first season will make you cry. So Rose is inspired off of like these child characters, which generally it's a child and a guardianship. It's generally not like it's usually just a guardian, someone who becomes a father figure to a character, and that is the relationship that Rose has with a man named London. He protects her, he raises her, he keeps her safe from the wasteland, right? He's not her dad, but he is essentially her father, right? So Rose is, I don't know, just succeeded with Rose. Like, she was just inspired off of, like, for example, in The Walking Dead season 1 by Telltale, she's inspired off of Clementine. Um, so yeah, I never had a sibling to inspire Rose. Rose is just, she just came from kind of like subconscious influences by games that have been dadified by dads. So yeah.
That's cool.
Um,
Character creation is a vital part of storytelling and world building.
it
Um,
is really hard.
yeah, yeah, it is. Because a lot of authors say that when they're writing a character, that they are in that character. They're talking, they're thinking like that specific character. Is this similar to your process, or is it more analytical?
It's kind of similar. Um, I know some authors, like, these characters really exist for them so the author can talk to them.
Right.
My dad described like an author like this who would talk to his characters. And for example, he wanted to kill one of his characters in his first book, but that character survived into like 7 more books, right? Because he wanted to survive. And I've kind of had this happen. Essentially, when I write characters and dialogues, like, I try to imagine them as a person because they are a person, right? Like, when characters do things to each other, like when they do bad things, when they hurt each other and kill each other, or like they do good things, like they help each other and survive together, right? That's not like, that is me making them do that. I'm puppeting them. But for me, that's like, those are what those people are doing. Like, I'm not killing somebody. Those characters are killing somebody. Like, the deeds of my characters are not me. So when those
Well, it's
characters
also
talk,
it's
oh
also
sorry.
important to look at it from the reader's perspective too. Like, is this action that this character is doing going to be in character for that particular
Oh yeah.
character, or is it out of character? So that's something that you have to be cognizant about.
Yeah, so when I write characters, they are who they are. Like, Oliver is Oliver. He is a survivor. Like, he is cold-blooded, he's hardened, he's from the old world, he's lost his world. Like, he's lost air conditioning, and he's lost the warm bed, right? He sleeps in a sleeping bag every night, and is generally in a really, really windy area, so he can't get sleep, or he has nightmares because he has PTSD. Um, he's seen bad things go down. So writing that character, I just try and, like, I don't think like that. That's just how the character is. That's who they are. They're a real person, um, that exists to me. And I've had this with characters where, like, sometimes the character, I'll have a plan to write a certain plot line, and the character will decide that the plot line is not going that way that I intended. It is going another way. And I'm like, okay, all right. Not that the character went up and said, this is what we're doing. It's just like, they went and did this, and then I guess it decides to go this way. And that's a better way. That's way better than what I would have written. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, that almost sounds schizophrenic to a non-writer to hear somebody
it's
talk
like,
like that.
that's just foul.
Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
the process. It's part of the creative process, and it's really effective for some writers to use that in their process.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I also have sets of characters, like a kind of grouping or tier. And this is kind of a problem because sometimes I'll write 2 characters and they'll kind of be the same, but it's really visible to me, but somebody who's reading the book cannot tell, especially if the characters in 2 different books. Like, the reader cannot tell. Thank God. But I have sets, like I have like an old man, or I have, like Rose, like a little girl, or I have like a man, right? So the subtle similarities is something I can see, but I don't think anybody else can see them. But I kind of like sets. It's kind of like roles, like actor roles. So in that way, I'm, as an author, like, you are kind of limited. You can't be all these people, um, to the extent that you wish, but it's enough.
Yeah.
It's an illusion.
So you're not going to believe this. We blew through almost 90 minutes already, and
Wow.
I'm willing to go a little bit longer if you're okay with it.
We can go for 30 more minutes if you want. And
Fair
you can
enough.
ask your questions because I know you
Fair
got a
enough.
lot of questions.
Yeah, I do, but it was really interesting hearing you spin the story about the world, and it kind of answered several of my questions. So
Sorry.
just listening to you talk, it's fine. Um, so take a step back to the apocalypse real quick, and I want to talk about real world apocalyptic scenarios. Um, if if that's okay with you, I don't know if you
Of
spend
course.
much time thinking about that or not, but do you think
After writing
there?
Forgive Us, yeah.
Okay, do you think there is a possibility that we could get to the brink and potentially go over the edge into an apocalypse?
Yes, but it's a combination of things. It is like in when I was when writing for Abandon Us, I used a combination of things because it takes a lot to topple over humanity. Like, for example, like imagine like the Black Death during like medieval Europe. Like, there are cities that were rendered empty because of that, but still civilization in Europe lived on, right?
Right, right.
So it's a combination of things. It's not less one thing. Like people were afraid like COVID would tip over, the entire like world, but it didn't. Probably because of proper responses and that kind of stuff. But it takes a lot more than that, right? It takes something big. It takes either like a mesh of things or one really big thing, right? Like an asteroid could hit us at any moment, we'd be dead, right? Um, which would really, really suck because I didn't publish my second book, or my third book, or any other book. Um,
Plus, you got a long, happy life ahead of you, and
yeah.
but
Um,
we're talking in general because there is a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
mm,
And if you're into cryptocurrency, you know what that is, FUD.
mm.
Do you know anything about cryptocurrency?
I know I know a little bit about it. I
Oh,
know that
okay,
people have invested a lot of money into it and then
that's
have had their lives destroyed. And I know a lot of people have invested money into it and then became really rich.
right. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt is a term that crypto investors use a lot. FUD, um, but it's permeates throughout society and all around the world in every country, and especially now, in, during this pandemic. But there's fear of, you know, climate change. That's a big one. Energy shortage, um, the pandemic, obviously. But there's a lot of fear, and I think it's a little bit unwarranted because, like you said,
It
the
takes a lot.
yeah the world to for the world to completely collapse, civilizations to crumble, governments to become non-existent. It's going to take
A, a big punch. A big punch.
a domino
Um,
effect. One thing happens after another for an extended period of time. I don't think we're
so
into that, but um, if we did get to that point, like say climate change after the pandemic is over, or if the pandemic doesn't stop and climate change starts to accelerate again, and we overspend or we over exhaust our financial system, and people start to starve and they start to rebel against the government. So there's a potential catastrophe.
okay,
How do
I
we
have some
have
commentary on that.
Okay,
Um,
well, go ahead and give your commentary. But my question is, how can we avert that kind of a um, the term is eluding me like crazy, but that domino effect where it just
how to
continues
avert
to,
that?
yeah,
To take precautionary steps. In some instances, I don't think you can. And Forgive Us, like it is a post-apocalyptic. It's an apocalyptic book, right? But like a lot of people fear permanent extinction, and I don't think that's really possible unless there was a great mass extinction of not just humans, but a lot of things, right? It would be like Earth's like seventh or eighth great extinction. And forgive us, there are civilizations, like people survive and then they rebuild, right? And the same thing happens like if the economy fails and people starve, a lot of people will die. It would be a really hard reset. The government will probably get overthrown, and then there will be a new government, a new system. People will have a reason to go farm and sell again, and then it would be reset, right? Civilization's a great cycle. And I think there's a quote where um, like hard times create strong men create good times make weak men make hard times. Everything has a cycle. Like the universe has a cycle, Earth has a cycle, civilization has a cycle. So the steps, you can't really predict the steps that will take because it could happen with anything, right? And like for example, like people fear nuclear war, right? And I think that's really plausible because like after the Cold War, like it seems that like the U.S. government and Russian government and Chinese government have like sworn off using nukes, right? Bull honky. They've made even bigger and more powerful nukes, right? That could destroy civilization with fire and radiation, right? Any moment. So to take the steps, like you just have to kind of do like everything, right? Like you got to keep like governments at peace with each other. You got to, like capitalism, communism, socialism, they all have their flaws, right? They all have cycles. They're not perfect. There's no perfect order, right? Capitalism is subject to great depressions and stuff like that, failures. It goes up and down, right? Like stocks go up and down. So you just have to, you have to adapt. One of the things I find that I think a government can't do is it just cannot adapt. It moves so slowly. Like everything that happens in like the Senate and stuff, so slow. So and like you can see this in like the DMV or something. Or anything else. Like it takes so long to do anything, right? It
Yeah,
just
and we were,
cannot adapt.
that's kind of where we started our talk is how change is so slow to happen.
And change is slow and when it comes to like people are afraid of climate change, like let's say coastal if it got so hot that coastal cities got flooded. You know what happened? People would move out of the way. People would move out of the way. Like, it wouldn't just swamp them. It would just encroach, encroach, encroach. And of course, like humans are great architects. Like, think of like the Netherlands. The Netherlands are entirely under sea level, right? They could get flooded at any point, but they have great engineers and architects that like make dams and stuff, right? And they adapt to situations. Same thing could happen with coastal cities, right? If everything froze over, humans would figure out a way out of that too, because we've survived an ice age. So it's about adapting. It's about being able to one look at something that's coming to you, like getting thrown at you, and duck,
Yeah.
right? Or and two, like being ready to like move, right? Like when it comes to like for example like city infrastructure and stuff like where I live, um the way things are like anywhere in the US there's like a highway that's been taking 3 years to like build. Like where I used to live in Colorado, there's this one highway to like Colorado Springs to Denver that's been under construction for like 5 years. Like I grew up watching that road be rebuilt and they still haven't finished it, right? And they have like entire machines and stuff, and every time we drive past there, you know what I see people doing? They're taking breaks. They're taking breaks, they're drinking their energy drink or whatever, right? So things move slowly, and the way things are built are not built to be prepared, right? They build it to slap it up and have it ready, right? And then things crack and they fall apart, and bridges fall into the water and stuff, right? So you just have to be able to adapt. You have to foresee, you know, that kind of stuff. I mean, you like, it's like maybe building a house, right? You
Well,
could build pipes like that, but you could build it like this, which is more expensive, and then it won't flood.
that's why it's so useful and vital to our survival that we have creative thinkers like yourself who project into the future. What's the potential? downfall, and if we continue down this path, so that policymakers and forward thinking people can kind of project that, plan for it, and avert that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what.
I think people also need a Twinkie. Have you ever seen like the in movies they have like a plunger and then they put a Twinkie at the end and then they have somebody chase the Twinkie? People
No.
need Twinkies, right? It was the thing I saw in Family Guy. They need
Does that
something
have
crap.
something to do with Twinkies being post-apocalyptic
Maybe.
survival food?
No, people need something to chase. Like I call it
Oh,
a Twinkie
okay,
because one time I saw on the show like they had like they had tried one character to have like lose weight by like having him have a Twinkie in front of him and like a carrot on a stick. That's
okay.
what I was trying to think of.
So he's
So people,
exercising, trying to get to the Twinkie.
yeah, so people need a Twinkie to chase after, right?
Okay.
Like politicians, they just get paid. That's it. They just get paid, bro. They don't have to do anything, and they get paid, right? You would, if you want a system that can adapt, you would have something like they get paid if something good happens, right? Of course, I wouldn't know how to how to create a system like that, but right now they just get paid. Like somebody who does nothing all day can get paid, right? So you'd have to have somebody, you have to reward somebody for doing something good. They have to have something to chase, right?
That sounds like capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, like politicians nowadays, or probably forever, are always out for themselves.
Yeah.
All politicians lie. All they want to do is, they're out for themselves, right? So if you
Well,
have a
they
system that rewards them for being good to other people, like,
yeah. Well, let's veer away from that because there's
yeah, a lot
that's
of
a
politics.
slippery slope. Politics is always a dirty topic.
Very
Um,
dirty.
when when people buy your book and they read your book, what do you hope readers take away from reading your story?
Oh, this is perfect. Um, there's a few messages in Forgive Us. I think one of the most important things is, kind of like the climate change in Forgive Us is not like, it gets warm. It gets very cold, and it's not because, celestial events are ever. It's just pollution, right? It's just garbage. So I think like there's a green message in there. And that's not like to just the normal person. It's like the corporation stuff. Like, have you ever got an Amazon box and you order something and it comes in a wrap that has a box that's wrapped that's in a box when
Yeah.
it could have just came in a box, right? Without the wrapping. So I hope there will be like people understand there's a green message in there. Like, how many times do you drive around on like the highway and something, you see garbage everywhere, or you go to a beach and there's garbage, or you go to a city there's garbage.
So I think a term that I would choose is a conservationist message.
Conservation, yeah. Um, I think that yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Like, not just for like normal people, but for like governments and stuff. Like, of course, like you can try and recycle, but of course there's systems in place to that doesn't make that quite great. But like, you know, I think people are very concerned about trying to recycle and stuff when they don't contend with the source of all the garbage they have, right? Like, I like every week my family, three people, fill up an entire garbage can to the max, like toes overflowing. And then that's not really our fault because we had to eat and stuff, but like that's just because of all the cans and all the wrap and all the cardboard boxes that things are put in, right? Like you stop, like essentially if you don't want everything to overflow with garbage, stop making garbage, right? I think IKEA was a really good about this with like furniture. Like, you get furniture at Walmart and it has all sorts of plastic wrapping. Well, at IKEA, everything is perfectly packed. So nothing like inside the package will like be able to move, and therefore it won't get broken, and therefore they don't need a bunch of filler. It just comes out.
So be aware of your environment and practice good conservation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another message would be war is hell. Um, I try to really describe grotesque violence and Forgive Us without it being too much. Trying to keep it sparse. Violence is not super common in Forgive Us, but it happens, and when it happens, it's a punch. So like, I hear in like politics all the time, people talk very violently in politics. They always, go to war with this, go to war with that, right? Like, violence in modern society is taken very delicately, as if it's fun, right? And I do violent things all the time. I do jiu-jitsu and I play violent games, but like real violence, like trying to hurt somebody, I think is taken very delicately because of games and movies and stuff, right? Like you don't react when somebody gets shot in a movie, right? Like if it's not like something like horrible, like a character you cared about got shot, like doesn't matter to me. Those bad guys, whew, gotta go shoot those bad guys. Like, so in Forgive Us, like I tried to show a very human message, like war is hell and violence has a real effect on people. Like Oliver doesn't feel good about like hurting people. He has to, but he doesn't feel good about it. He's human, These people that he hurts, they're human too. Like I specifically avoid a few words in Forgive Us. I don't say raider. I don't say bandit. Right? When I'm describing the other group, I don't say that they're like bandits or something. Like in Fallout, like you'll find raiders all the time and you kill them and they don't matter, right? But in Forgive Us, they're people. They're hungry too. They're thirsty too, and violence against them, it's just carried out equally. Like they'll be violent to you, you're violent to them because you're both hungry, right? This violence is it's real. It's not taken lightly. Um, I think the only moment it's taken lightly is against mutants. And the reason because of that is the mutants are the other, the thing that's like dehumanized. Um, so yeah, there's like empathy and war's hell's another message. There are a few other messages behind Forgive Us. I can't think of them though. Um,
Okay, well, if you think about it, maybe post a blog post, because I noticed that you write on your blog occasionally.
yeah.
Um, I okay, I'll ask you a couple more questions, and then we'll start to close this out.
Okay.
So the post-apocalyptic man, I totally blew that. The post-apocalyptic, the PA genre, it's a very compelling, and I know a lot of people that write for this genre. I know people who make films for that genre, um, and there's a ton of fans. What is it that compelled you about the apocalypse? What is it compelled you to write about it?
It's really interesting. It's really fun to write. Writing Forgive Us. Writing is hard, but writing post-apocalyptic stuff is fun. It's interesting to think about because I have to solve problems in my head. The reason it takes so long to write a new chapter is I write a couple paragraphs and then come to something that I have to study an hour to understand. Right?
What do you think do you think it's because the uh, it's basically a blank canvas where the world is wiped out, you're starting over from scratch,
Oh
so you can
yeah.
basically do whatever you want to.
Oh yeah.
Do you think that's
It's
kind of
it's
part of it?
easier to write the post-apocalypse than it is to write the apocalypse.
For sure.
There are a
Yeah.
lot of authors, a lot of games. They skip the apocalypse part and go to the
Yeah.
post-apocalypse part because it's way easier. That's one thing I struggle with in Abandon Us is I have to understand how real civilization works to write the apocalypse. So it's a very interesting genre. And for me, it's just it's fun. It's enjoyable. There's a lot of inspiration from it. Like when I like play a game like Fallout, it makes me want to go right in the series.
Yeah.
But for other people, like it's real, it's gripping because they think like this can happen, and it could very well happen. Um, so it has this fantasy draw without at the same time it has this fictional draw. I mean, it has this like real draw,
Hmm.
realism and fantasy at the same time. Like I find that like people who like post-apocalyptic fiction like it way more than they like medieval fiction
Hmm.
because it's real, it's grimy, there's hunger and there's bullets, and your gun doesn't have that many bullets and you don't know if you're gonna live till tomorrow. Like it's gripping. well, medieval fantasy is more like there's a more external threat. Like the Ring in the Lord of the Rings is not an immediate threat like a mutant who's gonna eat your face or hunger. It's a kind of like objective threat, kind of like a vague threat, like
Mhm.
something that's really like hmm. There's two kinds of threats. There's the real threat, which the brain understands immediately. Like hunger, you understand hunger immediately. But the threat that the ring poses, you have to use like monkey brain versus thinking brain. Monkey
You
brain understands
understand
hunger,
you
but
understand the hunger of that lion that's going to eat you even more.
yeah, but you don't
Right?
understand like
Imminent danger, imminent threat is easy to understand.
yeah, but like fantasy threats are like they're like an like we're not like I don't go around thinking all day like an asteroid could hit us at any moment because it's like the ring from the Lord of the Rings. It's that kind of weird vague threat, right?
Okay, so my next question, I had two questions. I'm gonna combine them into one.
Okay.
But okay, because of your age, writing in the adult fiction genre or science fiction genre, what was your most challenging thing that you had to overcome about writing for adults? Knowing your audience is mature adult audience, and what is your favorite thing about writing?
So my favorite thing about writing is one, it's fun. Another thing is like it jogs my brain. It makes my brain exercise, and also like people like it a lot. Like it makes me really, really happy for somebody to tell me that they love my book, right? It's like, wow, somebody read this book from me. I made this and thought it was great. So like that just it's feel good. It's like that kind of praise. It was not hard for me to write for adults because when I wrote role play, like I wrote like adult style like horror and stuff like that. One of the hardest things actually, which is not featured in Forgive Us, is physical intimacy because it just feels weird to like write about characters. They're doing it. It's just weird to write about, and that's like an adult thing. That's just weird. Ugh. But like characters killing each other and like civilizations having wars, that's really easy to write. But like love and characters, like getting on, that's hard. Like like embracing each other. So that was harder to write. Like writing the relationship between London and Rose and having that fathership. Like writing Rose was easy. Like having like that little girl character was easy to write, but writing London was harder because like writing the feelings, like caring about somebody. Um, that was hard. Like Rake making there's a scene in Forgive Us where the characters have a really like they have a relationship, um, like a moment like okay, she gives him a gift and he gets really happy, and that was a really happy like father daughter bonding moment. So I found that really hard to write, that kind of emotional happiness moment.
Hmm.
I saw something in the chat with the three covers.
Yeah.
This is the first cover. It's okay. This is the second cover. Oh, it's a little bit dark. It reflects a lot because it's really dark, but this is the
Yeah.
second
Okay.
cover. And this is the current cover.
Yeah.
And you can find that on Amazon.
Uh, so I promise to give you time to tell people how to get your stuff, but
That can be done in 30 seconds.
okay. Earlier, Scott asked about the publishing process. You said you self-published. Are you still self-published, or are you working with a
Yeah, I'm
publisher?
still self-published.
Okay.
I'm working with like like an editor and that kind of stuff, but I'm self-published. The writing process, the editing and publishing. Um, I think what a lot of people forget when it comes to writing a book is when you hit the end, when you write the end at the end of the book, you're not done. Like for example, I'm not done with Forgive Us. So Forgive Us took 2 years to make, 1 year to make the book and reach the end, another year editing it. I have reread this book so many times, it's disgusting. I cannot reread this book One, because I'm a better writer and it's ugly, and two, I just don't want to read it again. I really don't want to read it. So you had to reread the book over and over again. You had to edit it. You had to catch so many things. You had to reread chapters. There's a lot of work into editing by yourself. But then people should get an editor. Everybody should have an editor. Like, there's a lot of books I've been told by an editor that like are made by people who have a name in writing, like Stephen King. I don't know if Stephen King gets every book of his edited, but some people just, they get that, golden card. They don't have to have an editor, so they can just publish it. And then the book's not so great because, you need a fresh pair of eyes. Like you need an editor. And editor, like the process of having an editor comes in layers. And it depends on your editor what happens. For me, it was a 3-layer process. Story, um, things like paragraphs, and then like basic things like punctuation. Then after that, publishing it, you have to think about when to publish, running ads on Amazon because you want to run ads, and it takes a lot of time and effort. Um, and it's an investment. It's not like you publish it and a horde comes to you. It's an over time thing. It takes time for a book to reap its reward, right? So you have to be patient. You can't get angry. You have to publish it, and you don't be afraid of reviews, right? A bad review is a good review, unless it's just this sucks. But if it's a bad review and they describe why, you learn something. Which is why next time you give any author in a bad review, you tell them why, so they can learn. So it takes time. Don't publish it like later in the year. Publish it early in the year. Um, for example, when I published Forgive Us, I published it in December 2020. So when it became 2021, it was last year's book. Bad idea. Publish it in like January.
Hmm.
Um, Run ads. Go and ask, like, go get help. Right? You can't do it by yourself. Go on Facebook. Go on any forum. Like, go to writers areas and like ask authors. Like, ask other people. Like, what did you do? How did you do it? Like, my dad, like when I published my book, like he went to all sorts of writing like authors places and asked like, how do you run your ads? How do you do this? What's this? And you'll figure things out like you need a good blurb. Like my Amazon page has like a description, right? You need to learn how to do that. There's been like 8 Amazon page descriptions I've had. I've had 3 covers. Like you have to have a good cover, you have to have a good name, you have to have a good blurb, and this takes time. It takes rewriting. Like when you get it published, you're still gonna have to work on it more, right? People might catch something. So really, when you hit the end, you're not done.
That's a good place to leave it, because my next question was, what insights would you give a young writer or a new writer, or somebody who wants to get to that point where they have a published book in their repertoire?
Yeah, I do
And
have
then
advice for
and
writing.
final thoughts.
Okay, I wanted to give some advice on writing for any author. When I wrote Forgive Us, it took me a year. The first 6 months were 1/3 of the book. It was just me going on the book and randomly writing whatever. And then the second 2/3, I created something called the Octo Plan. The book's divided into 3 parts. The Octo Plan was a plan to finish each part with 8 chapters. After I wrote a plan, like production doubled, and I wrote 2/3 of a book in 6 months. So you need a plan, write a plot line. You won't never stick to a plot line that you created. But you need, as I said, the Twinkie on the stick. You need a carrot on a stick, something to chase, something when you sit down and write, you can see a path. You might not follow the path, but at least you can see it. And then when you write, you might deviate and you might have to change the plot line, but it's there so you can walk forward. So you need a plan. Just create a basic plot line, right? How's the story going to unfold? And then fill it in between. Final
Scott's
thoughts.
talking about the covers. He loves all the covers. He's also an artist, digital artist, and he does book covers for writers.
It took a while to figure out a good cover for Forgive Us. Um, a lot to struggle.
It's
Um,
important. The cover, a cover. See, I think I'm not a writer, but I'm a reader, even though I don't read a lot anymore. But what draws me to a book, the first thing that is going to decide if I'm going to pick up a book or not is the cover. The second thing I look at is the summary. So the cover is, if it's not good enough, I'm not even going to look at it.
Oh yeah. How we settled on this one was competition. We had a competition, an art competition, and people anywhere, anybody could publish a piece of art, and it was going to be a competition. I think like 30 people would like submit something. Lots of people submitted it. Like when we had the competition, I'm like so many people submitted it, and then like we had votes, like we went through one by one, and eventually we settled on that. So
Yeah.
for people who are looking to make a cover, have a competition, and then you'll get you'll get something like have a reward.
And I
People will
just
do
have
their
to
best.
say, I just have to say, in regards to that, that is a job in itself. Running a any kind of a competition, you have to plan it, you have to execute it, you have to get people involved in it. I mean, it's how much how much time and energy did you guys spend just doing that?
So much time,
Yeah.
so much time. Like like I think like 3 months.
It's
Like
it's
just
not an
pushing
easy
effort.
thing to do. People, I'm in marketing, and I've had people throw that at me as a suggestion to build their business, and it's like that's not an easy process, man. It
No.
it might sound simple, but simple does not mean easy,
Yeah.
and just people don't grasp how much work goes into something like that.
Authoring
Uh,
is hard.
yeah, yeah, I believe it is. I mean, I know because most people don't do it. If you look at the mass majority of people, most people are not authors. The
I know many people who've written a book or writing books, but they don't publish them because it's just so hard.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, it takes it takes a lot of willpower, focus, help. You need help. Make sure you have help.
yeah,
Don't do it alone.
it's a good point. It's a team sport. It might be your name on the book, which means you're ultimately responsible for what's in it. But if you try to do everything on your own, you've essentially doubled or tripled your workload, if
Yeah,
not more.
Forgive Us
Uh,
would not have been as good as it is without an editor. Everybody needs an editor.
that's something that I've heard so many authors say is that their editors are vital to the process.
Absolutely.
And yeah, books that are self-published might be able to get on the market faster. The authors don't have to share the revenues with anybody. They don't have to pay an editor, but the end product is going to be a lot less.
Yeah, the you need help. Publishing, getting a publisher company, that's really hard. I mean, it's just like you gotta throw it out there. Like most important thing for any author, get your book out there. Nobody cares about your book if they can't read your book, right? Yeah, if like, oh, I have a book. Oh, where can I buy it? Oh, I haven't published it yet.
Yeah,
It doesn't work. Like get your book out there, get to the end, get an editor, get it out, right?
cool.
As
I'm
long as it's out, you've accomplished a lot.
just going through the. Oh, that Scott already posted that. Good show. I thought it was a great show, and I think it was thanks to ET for sharing his so much insight, so much imagination. I cannot tell you how impressed I am with the work that you did, your knowledge, and the amount of um, shoot. I sometimes lose track of words, but your
You're gonna make me
accomplishment,
fluster.
you,
You're gonna make me fluster.
your accomplishment at such a young age. It's just it blows my mind. I'm happy for you that you've been able to do this, and I'm sure your parents are over the moon proud of you.
Oh yeah.
Um, so tell people how they can either get in contact with you if they wanted to reach out to you, and definitely tell them how they can find your books.
So, first of all, the books. Forgive Us can be found on Amazon, Lulu.com, and Barnes& and Nobles. You can find the audiobook version, if that's your thing, on Audible. You can contact me on Instagram, E.T. Gunnarsson, like for E.T. Gunnarsson. And don't forget to also check out my website, braggypress.com, BRAGI press.com. Braggy Press is, it's on Facebook, it's on Instagram, has the website. Go check it out. Um, yeah, most importantly, check me on. If you want the book, go on Amazon. That's my personal opinion. If you want the audiobook, go on Audible. So yeah, that's how you can find the book.
Cool.
And it'll look like this. And don't fall for the other page. There's an extra version on Amazon that looks like this. This is not the real book. This is for people to resell.
I also saw it on Target. It came up on
Target.
at Target. Yeah, hardcover. Maybe it was a different book. I don't. But yeah, I saw it at Target in hardcover.
Well, if we worked out a deal with Target, that sounds really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
uh, um, so yeah, I wanted to really quickly touch on another thing that somebody asked. Somebody asked about my high fantasy world called Aditum.
Right. Yeah.
Aditum will not be shown for a while. I will finish this series called the Odemark series. There will be 3 books in the series. Abandon Us is the second book, and then Remember Us is the third book. After that, I will go into my high fantasy world, and I will make maybe a 5-book series from Aditum. Aditum is like Middle Earth. It has unique cultures, like real design cultures. It might have some constructed languages. I don't know how to do language stuff. Tolkien's a jerk because he was a linguist and therefore could make Elvish and stuff. I'm not. But it has its own continent, how the world works, everything like that. It's a really complex world, and it will be. I will use it after the Odemark series is complete. So stay tuned for that
Very
in a few
cool.
years.
Well, way to leave a teaser for people. Yeah. So yeah, everybody go check out ET's books, but his pages. Reach out to him if you guys have questions.
Yep.
Thank you
And
so much for being here, man, and spending more time than I had anticipated. But it was really a pleasure talking to you, man. Thank you.
thank you for inviting me on. It was a good experience to be invited on. Um, it was really, it's fun to talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm glad people like it.
Well,
Um,
I'm glad you had a good time, and you're welcome to come back on when your next book is ready to launch. If you want to come do a little pre-launch
oh,
or
definitely, definitely. I
after
will
it comes
definitely
out.
tell you all about it.
Awesome. Good deal. Okay, Et, have a good night. Thank you so much, and you take care.
All right, thank you.
And good night, everybody in the chat.
Good night.